Okay, so hello and welcome to Food Allergy Friends. In this podcast, I'm talking to Amanda Cordell, who is from Eos Network. And as this is Eosinophil Awareness Week, we're going to find out about how these diseases affect people and life. So hi, Amanda, how are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you, Stella. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm delighted to be here.
Jolly good. That's brilliant. So I'm just wondering, could you tell us to start with what eosinophils are and how they can make people ill?
Okay, so eosinophils are a type of white blood cell. They're produced in your bone marrow and they circulate throughout your body. They can be anywhere in your body, but we specifically look at the gastrointestinal tract. They can be friend or foe. They have a positive role. So they also help fight against parasites. So for instance, if you had a parasitic infection such as E. coli, etc., they would go to the bacteria in your gut and they would latch themselves on and inject. What's inside of them is multiple toxins. Now, they don't actually know how many toxins are inside. They're still learning about them, but that's one positive role that they would take on. They also can help protect you against certain cancers and have many other roles. And as I say, they're still learning a lot. When you have an eosinophilic disease, however, you produce too many of them. And they don't actually know why that is. Again, they're still learning. But when you have too many of them, this degranulation process can happen when they attach to the lining of your gut and they degranulate into the tissue, and these toxins release and cause damage and inflammation within the tissue. And this can be different depending on what part of the gastrointestinal tract they are increased in value. Now, certain parts of it, they understand better than others. So for instance, in the esophagus, if you have too many in there, there is an agreed diagnosis consensus as to how many are too many. And that's because by rights, you shouldn't have any in your esophagus. So it was much easier to determine that. And obviously when these degranulate and cause inflammation in your esophagus, it causes difficulty with swallowing food as the inflammation decreases the size of your tube that goes from your throat through to your stomach. Other parts of the gut that they can cause problems is, and it's rarer, much rarer in fact, is in the middle part of your gastrointestinal tract, that's called eosinophilic gastroenteritis, and in the lower part, which is eosinophilic colitis, which is in your bowel, and that causes lots of other complicated problems such as failure to thrive and diarrhea and bloody stools and mucus, and the list goes on. Unfortunately, in these lower parts, they don't have an agreed diagnosis consensus yet. We hope it's coming soon because there's lots of research around that area and new treatments that are being developed. But as I say, that's much rarer.
Wow, so it's not very nice to have these conditions then. And so are they allergy related at all?
Okay, so it's classed as a non-IgE mediated response. Which sounds very complicated, and the word allergy over the last couple of decades really has become increased in use and gets used for an awful lot of terms, and I've seen that as I've been involved in allergy advocacy for the last 2 decades. So when we think of an allergy, it's usually, for instance, to when someone carries an EpiPen because they have an immediate allergy, say for instance to nuts or fish or something like that. Or when we have hay fever, that's another form of allergy. And these are often immediate responses. So we might have, for instance, with anaphylactic, the swelling of the throat and stopping to be able to breathe, or we might have a skin reaction, or with hay fever, we have the runny nose and the runny eyes. And as I say, they are IgE mediated responses generally. When you have a eosinophilic disease, this is caused by a non-IgE mediated response. So it's a different pathway within your immune system. And this is a delayed response. So therefore, it makes it much harder to determine what those things are that are causing the problem. I mean, it can happen up to, a week later to have a non-IgE mediated response. So therefore, determining what actually caused the trigger is really, really challenging. And it means that, unfortunately, there isn't a simple test that you can have done to work out what is triggering this inflammatory response within your body. All the usual tests that people use to try and work out what are immediate allergies, such as skin prick testing and blood testing, which also are not 100% conclusive, might I add. You can have a positive skin prick test or a negative skin prick test for an immediate allergy and that be incorrect. They are only indicators. When you have a eosinophilic delayed reaction, there is no test other than long-winded process of removal and reintroduction over a 6 to 12 week period. So yes, it's very, very challenging finding those triggers.
So that's not at all easy then, is it, Amanda? Okay, so EOS Network,
yes,
is your charity, which you set up to help people who have eosinophilic diseases. So can you just tell us a bit about how that came into being?
Okay, so as I said previously, I am been involved in advocacy now for nearly 2 decades. And my motivation for that is I have 2 children, a boy aged 18, Sam, and my daughter aged 13, nearly 14, going on 21, Heather, who were both born with, very shortly after being born, were diagnosed with eosinophilic diseases. It's been a very long and complicated pathway. They are what I would class as the severe end of a complex spectrum. So they're not, and all of these, I should say, all eosinophilic diseases can affect people very, very differently, from mild cases where they only have a reaction to one type of food to really complex cases where they really don't understand what's going on yet, and it's really, really challenging. Unfortunately, my eldest is one of those really complicated cases we haven't really got to the bottom of. So hence still my motivation to do what I've been doing. And, you know, it started out, 18 years ago because there wasn't any support out there. And actually we didn't even have a diagnosis name at the beginning because it was so rare. And when first realised that there was other people who actually were dealing with the same problems, and travelled out to America to learn more about it because they had a centre there and they had an educational day. One of the big motivations for me was to actually provide some form of support back in the UK, and started out with a Yahoo support group, which grew and evolved over the years. It eventually was registered as a charity, predominantly for parents and children actually at the time, because we didn't really know much about adults with EOE. And for a period of time I had to take a back seat because my eldest was actually very, very sick. And when I was still obviously looking to see how we could improve things with this eosinophilic disease, because there still was so little understanding, and for us no treatments were working. And eventually I went back out to America to see what had evolved in the US, and realised that there was a real acute need to bring international research around the globe. And so Eos Network evolved into what it is today. And we now have a charity that has 2 arms, which is very exciting. We have the community hub, which is there to support patients wherever they are. We will support anybody, and we will help signpost to more local support if it's elsewhere in the globe and there is somebody there that can support them, and if there isn't, we will support them accordingly. Adults, children, families, whoever you are, we will try and help guide you and make sure that you're not isolated in living with your disease. And we also have the other arm, which is our global healthcare professional network. And the whole purpose of that is because as a rare disease, you find a specialist who has a real keen interest in that disease. And I could name quite a few off the top of my head who dedicated their lives to understanding why the eosinophil does what it does and how they can help treat those patients and improve their quality of life. But they work predominantly in isolation, maybe in small centres, and what we wanted to change as an organisation was to bring that research and understanding and collaborative thinking together around the world. And we're very excited to say, you know, since we launched that just over a year ago, was that we now have nearly 200 healthcare professionals who are in 22 countries. And so that, and it's still fast growing. And so we are delighted, and they are all keen to also share and collaborate, because actually there's so much learning to be had. And I think we've seen that over the last year with COVID, what amazing things can be achieved when people collaborate. And that's what we're seeing, that sort of collaboration happen with the network that we've got. And it's very exciting. And as an organisation, we now work closely with we patient advocate globally within the Centre for Eosinophilic Gastrointestinal Research in the US. We are their global patient advocate. And in the UK, we're working closely with the British Society of Gastroenterology to write new guidelines for both paediatric and adults. And we're also working with the British Society of Paediatric Gastroenterology to try and bring about more education. And we'll continue to work with more and more associations to help improve lives of patients living with this disease.
Wow, so you've gone global. That's just huge, isn't it? And obviously, being a charity, it costs money to do all these things, and to get research, and to do the traveling, going to America. Zoom, I think over the past year, I think we've all found Zoom really helpful, but it's not the same as face-to-face meetings and conferences. So to be able to go to America or across Europe, wherever you end up going for a meeting, that all costs. So obviously it would be really helpful for anyone watching, if you want to help at all, go to the website, the eosnetwork.org, that's on the poster behind Amanda there. And I'm sure that there are ways, plenty of ways there to help, whether it's making a donation or fundraising in some other way.
Absolutely.
That would be brilliant.
So we are 100% not-for-profit organisation. We run purely on volunteers at this time, and we are very excited at the rate of growth that we've had. We run a support phone line for people who need to speak to someone. We've run over the last 3 months wellbeing Wednesday webinars, providing support and education to patients and to healthcare professionals to learn more about the disease. We run a website that's supported by our medical healthcare professional advisory board, so that all the information that everybody gets is correct. And we know that way they're being fed the right information, not Dr. Google. And obviously we'll continue to try and increase these activities. We've also developed an action plan for people. One of the symptoms they have when eosinophilic esophagitis is actually having food severely stuck in their esophagus, and that means that actually they can't swallow even water or saliva, because the food is wedged completely in their esophagus. And so we've developed an action plan so that people know what to do when that happens, because it's quite scary. And actually, as we all know, when you feel ill or something's wrong, we never quite know what the action is to do. Should you go to hospital? Should you call a doctor? And so we've developed that so people know what to do, and as a passport to carry with them. So when they turn up at the hospital with this rare condition, it's an easy way to explain what's happening for them. And we will continue to try and develop these tools to help manage it. But as you say, Stella, rightly so, this does all cost money. It costs money even to have a website sitting there, and to actually be able to develop the pictures and the tools and social media that goes out. We have to use obviously some of the internet programs and software, and it's not all free. So in order for us to do more and to be able to help more people, and as our goal says, to try and one day see that everybody with this disease can eat without pain, is what we would love to see. And if not be supported to help live and manage the disease, then we need people's help to be able to do that. So if you want to get involved, or you want to raise funds, you want to donate, please, as Stella says, click on the website, have a look around, and yeah, get involved, and please help give to change the future for those patients.
That's wonderful. Okay, and just to finish, what would be the nightmare situation if you're going out to, say, for a birthday party or a wedding? How do you deal with that sort of situation?
Now, Stella's asking me this because she knows we did have a brief chat before. We were talking about, and without even thinking about it, we were talking about, you know, what the realities of living with a condition like this. And actually, I think with living with any allergy, you know, it's allergies, immediate allergies, been highlighted a lot in the news over the last couple of years. But, you know, it's still really tricky. It's still really scary to go out and eat when you have an allergy. And actually, when you have one allergy and you can say, right, I can't eat eggs, you can say to a waiter, I can't have anything with egg in it. Now, you still have the fear that you know, that waiter's going to go away and what happens in the kitchen when you aren't there. But, you know, if it hasn't got egg in it, you'll be all right. When you have eosinophilic disease, it's more often than not just not one type of food. You know, they say the top 6 foods are egg, wheat, dairy, milk, fish and nuts. Some people, when they have the lower gastrointestinal disease, have more than 6, or it could be more than 6 as one of the triggers for eosinophilic esophagitis. And, you know, some people, unfortunately, because about 70% of people with eosinophilic disease also have some form of other allergies. So you may well have an immediate allergy as well. That's quite regular in a lot of the people with this disease. So not only might you be managing the fear of having an anaphylactic reaction, and you might be carrying your EpiPen for that, you also have the fear that you might be ingesting one of the triggers for your eosinophilic disease. And so therefore, eating out, it becomes something that is a phenomenon, really, I think, you know, for us as a family. And we always laugh and say we're normal till we leave the house. You know, we've been, you know, we in this environment, everything's normal. We can cook safely, you know, there's not a problem. We don't have any cross-contamination. There's a fridge full of food that my children can eat. We tend to eat the same foods a lot of the time because over 18 years, it's become easier to do that. They have a cupboard that's got their safe foods in it. They know they can go to whenever they like. I spend a lot of money on food, a lot of money. It's really, really expensive. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the free-from foods are still not safe for us. And so, you know, although the free-from aisles become really, really large over the years, often it contains something if you've got to cut out that many foods that they can't have. And unfortunately, a lot of the free-from foods, when you take out the normal basic ingredients that someone without these problems would eat, they replace it with a lot of other foods. Sometimes not always food. Sometimes it's some weird, wonderful chemical that you've never heard of. And so we tend not to eat a great deal of the free-from products either. So it's a lot of making fresh. And actually, when you mention, as we said earlier, you know, we've got a wedding coming up, which we hope has been, you know, postponed since COVID. Maybe it's going to happen this year. My daughter is supposed to be bridesmaid. It's a buffet. And that to me just fills me with horror and dread because I'm not quite sure how we're going to manage it. When you have small children with allergies and intolerances, it's not a problem because let's be honest about it, most people with small children take their own food anyway. You take baby food with you. Well, 18 years later, when you tell your kids you're going to whip out a packed lunchbox in the middle of a wedding, that's not going to go down too well. And, you know, over the past years, we've done various different things where we've phoned ahead and asked them to make the jacket potato in tinfoil because we know that's safe, or to cook a piece of chicken in tinfoil because we know that's safe. Well, I have to tell you, at nearly 14 and 18, my son now hates the word jacket potato and hates the thought of eating it even more. In fact, it's like he looks at me with the death stare when I mention jacket potato. I quite like a jacket potato myself, but he's eaten so many of them in his life, and it seemed to be the only go-to thing that could ever have when we was out. That I still don't know the answer to what we're going to do when we go to the wedding. And that's really the truth, you know, because the easiest option is to make something and take it with us. That's the safest option, probably the most interesting option because they could have something that they really like. I have in the past taken food, run to the kitchen of wherever we are, asked for a plate, put it on the plate, made it look like everybody else's in order for my kids to feel like they're participating. Halloween, I've run around people's houses and delivered things to their house that are non-food treats, so that when we knock on the door, there's something there for the kids. That gets harder as you get older. I'm not always going to be there to prep it before. And, you know, even if you skate through and not worry about the you hope there's no cross-contamination. My daughter carries an EpiPen for immediate allergies as well, for peanuts. That you think, are they going to be safe enough that they're not going to come into contact and have something in an anaphylactic reaction? That's scary one. Scary two, that there is cross-contamination on a buffet table. Even if you look at cucumbers being cut up, that they're safe to eat a cucumber. Was it cooked? Was it cut up on a board with anything else that they shouldn't have? You know, that could cause them to be really ill. We don't know. Or do we worry about their mental well-being, in them not being able to socially participate in what everybody else is doing? And, you know, 18 years down the line, I don't have the answer for that. We'll muddle through when it comes to the time, and, you know, probably end up being a bit of both, as long as it isn't a jack of potato, as far as my son's concerned. We're kind of working on the theory, as I said to you before. We're thinking, do we make some free-from pizzas before we go and ask them to cook them in the oven? And then we'll have to run the risk, if I'm cooking it in an oven, that it might be exposed to something else. I don't know. It's really, really tricky. And it's funny, my son said to me the other day, as a member of the community, we had a new family join on with a young lad the same age as my son, who's also lived with probably extreme restrictions like my son has all of his life. And the first thing my son said, the first thing the boy said to me was, and he'll know who he is if he watches this, said, "What happens eating out? Do you ever eat out?" Or I said, "No." And he was like, "Wow, it's the first time I've spoken to someone who's the same." You know, so yeah. It's tricky.
It is tricky, because these are rare diseases as well, so people haven't heard of them. Like you said, Amanda, the word allergy has been used a lot recently. People are familiar with it. Sadly, people do use it to mean that they just don't like something, which does not help those of us with allergies. But at the end of the day, we're all living with this to some degree or another, and we just need to help each other. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Thank you for spreading the word of National Eosinophilic Awareness Week. It's greatly appreciated, Stella.
That's okay. We've all got to do our bit.